This was the greatest extermination since World War II. A country with 22.4 million square kilometers of land, 15 member republics, a superpower with more than 100 ethnic groups, 30,000 nuclear warheads in one hand, standing army up to 5.13 million men, steel torrent can be flat in a week, referral throughout Western Europe, invincible overlord, one that could send the first human into space, can build a space station and the space shuttle, blizzard tech giant in just a few days, just when there is no foreign invasion, in the absence of a full-scale civil war, collapse, dead clean, 5 million army, not even a single one. No division stood up, shoot for the country they swore allegiance to. What kind of power can make a company? America has to be afraid of the red beast with 3 points. It's completely hollowed out from the inside. What we're going to talk about today, it is not a simple history of the decline and fall of empires, but a decades-long brutal power play. This is a story about lies, a true game of greed, betrayal, and destiny. Welcome back to the world. After World War II, the country's fortunes rose and fell for 80 years. I am Governor Yang Guo. Let's clear the fog of history today, back to that snowy 1991. Look at the undercurrent below the surface. How did they strangle the Soviet Union? Act 1: Funeral relays and the empire of blood loss. Go back in time to the early 1980s. The iron and wood of the Cold War is still tight. If you were standing on Red Square in Moscow at that time, you will never feel it. This country is dying. The GDP of the Soviet Union at that time reached 60% of the GDP of the United States, is undisputed second in the world, but the superficial strength cannot hide the failure of internal organs. From 1982 to 1985, in just 3 years, the Soviet Union staged a ridiculous funeral relay race. Perestroika's father Andropov, the 3 top leaders of Chernenko have successively dead at the helm of the Kremlin. It's all a bunch old people who need help. Even when walking, aging leadership is just a microcosm of imperial rigidity. More deadly are 2 bleeding wounds. The first wound was in the mountains of Afghanistan in 1979. Soviet troops entered Afghanistan. It was supposed to be a tail-dropping blitz, but it turned into a 10-year security war. 1.50 million Soviet youth were sent to poverty in the land of disease. 15,000 people turned into lead caskets and shipped back home. Tens of billions of dollars in military spending were plunged into the abyss. The second wound is oil. High postage prices in the 1970s let the Soviet Union make a lot of money. It also conceals their rigid planned economic system. Abnormal development of heavy industry. Light industry is a mess. The Soviet Union could build the largest nuclear submarine in the world, but they can't make enough toilet paper for their citizens. And soap now. 1985. The international wind has changed. The United States and Saudi Arabia have joined forces. International oil prices rose from $30 per barrel all the way down to $10. The Soviet Union's foreign exchange income was suddenly lost. What should I do if I run out of money? The machine is still running. The privileged are still enjoying imported vodka and caviar, and ordinary people, it takes 2 hours a day queue in front of empty supermarket shelves just to buy a stiff brown bread. When a system can only make weapons, when you can't make butter, he has already lost popular support. Act 2: The life of Chernobyl. The price of lies. If you want to find an accelerator for the death of the Soviet Union, it must have been 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986. That night, over Pripyat, Ukraine, a strange blue beam of light rose. Chernobyl nuclear power plant, reactor 4. There was an explosion. 8 tons of strong radioactive material were thrown into the sky. The amount of radiation released is equivalent to the atom of Hiroshima, 400 times as many bullets. But even more terrifying than nuclear radiation is the radiation of lies. 3 days after the accident, Moscow has chosen to hide. They cut off communication, blocked message just a few dozen kilometers away from the nuclear power plant in Kiev. Tens of thousands of unsuspecting people, it's even organized, held a grand May Day parade in the streets, breathing the deadly air with a metallic sweetness, until clouds containing high doses of nuclear radiation floated to Sweden under pressure from the international community. The disaster that the Soviet Union was forced to admit to cover up this man-made disaster. The Soviet Union paid a heavy price. They mobilized a whole 500,000 cleaning up soldiers and miners. These guys were wearing hazmat suits. Even with bare hands on the ruins of high-intensity radiation cleanup, graphite fragments. 18 billion rubles were drained in an instant. Chernobyl bombed. It's not just a reactor. He completely blew up the Soviet people. The last bit of trust in the country. The common people suddenly woke up in their eyes. Our lives are more important than our faces. Act 3: Shock therapy and loose screws. Gorbachev's deadly poison. As the empire was about to fall, a young leader named Gorbachev, here it is. He realized that the country was terminally ill. He wants reform. But the prescription he fired, not gradual warming, it's a powerful poison. Openness and democratization. The ancient Chinese talked about governing a big country if they cooked a little fairy. Let's talk about crossing the river by feeling the stones. At a time when the economic structure is extremely fragile, what we need most is stability. But Gorbachev did the opposite. He did not address the food that the common people are most concerned about, the problem of wearing clothes. Has directly released speech control opened the Pandora's box of history? The history of the Soviet past is carefully packaged. Review now and relax. Countless dusty black histories have been turned out. The cruelty of the Great Purge, tragedy in Katyn Forest, the secret reconstruction of the Soviet-German non-aggression pact. The belief system of the whole society collapsed in an instant. People not only denied Stalin, even began to deny Lenin. The legitimacy of the Soviet Union's existence was finally denied, and even more deadly, Gorbachev bestowed upon the republic's great autonomy. It's like a big family. Everyone was because complaining about not having enough to eat. Now the parents suddenly say you can scold me whatever you want, you can also manage your own money. What's the result? Must be a separation. Logic makes people think, but emotion leads to action. And the rage was inflamed. The wildfire of nationalism started in the vast land of the Soviet Union. Liao Yuan Act 4, holding hands in the Baltic Sea. Carnival with nationalism. We need to see the undercurrent in this game. We must look to the Baltic Sea. August 23, 1989, in Lithuania, Latvia and Isania, the three Baltic republics. An event that shocked the world happened. Baltic Way. 2 million across 3 countries holding hands forms a chain. This human chain is 600 kilometers long. It runs from Tallinn all the way to Vilnius. And they use it peacefully but visually. Way of impact. The most decisive declaration was made to Moscow: we want to be independent. This is no longer a high-level political game, it's a collective rupture. At the bottom, in traditional Chinese philosophy, pay attention to unity, pay attention to the same track of the car. Thousands of years of cultural integration of books and texts let the Chinese have a sense of unity, an obsession that goes deep into the bone marrow. But the Soviet Union was different. He was pinched together by a powerful machine. The high pressure of Great Russianism. It covers up hundreds of ethnic groups. The deep contradiction: once the central pressure weakens, those old hatreds that were once covered up immediately erupted in the bloodiest way. The streets of Tbilisi, Georgia, Baku, Azerbaijan. Bloodshed continues. Soviet soldiers who once swore to defend the Soviet Union, in despair and confusion they were ordered to put down the riot. But when faced with the unarmed, when you are angry with your own citizens to the extreme, who should the muzzle be pointed at? The silence and hesitation of the army declares that the state apparatus has been completely paralyzed. Act 5. 819. Absurd empire's heartbeat stopped. The time has come to August 1991 to save an alliance that was about to fall apart. The hardline top of Sugan launched an 819 event that shocked the world. They are under house arrest. Gorbachev on vacation in Crimea. Declare a state of emergency. Moscow streets. There was the roar of tanks again at a press conference broadcast live nationwide. The hands of coup leader Yanayev. I've been shaking violently, unconsciously. Those trembling hands exposed their inner weakness and fear they didn't really have. Yes, nearest or they didn't. Ts. They aftermath. They don't know whether or crushing or not. The labor services ped. And the other side, the head man of agricultural power, the government. Keen to seize this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, he jumped on a bus. T-80 tanks are parked outside of Russia at the Russian White House. Surveys to thousands of Moscow citizens give a speech call on everyone to resist the coup, and here comes the big moment. The coup committee, the Soviet Union's most elite special forces Alpha Coefficient Group, ordered the arrest of Yeltsin, a death order to capture the White House. As a result, the commander of the Alpha Coefficient team, after looking at the map quietly for a while, disobeying orders, they did not fire. The entire army opted for neutrality. This one. The military that once terrified the Western world. I'm exhausted at the moment. They don't want to turn their guns on their fellow citizens anymore. Just 3 days the coup became a farce. The hardliners collapsed. Not only did 819 fail to save the Soviet Union, instead, it sounded his final death knell. Sugan was outlawed. The republics are like water declaring independence. Act 6. The red flags of Belarus fell to the ground. The endings of history often lack epic tragedy. Instead, there is a kind of casual sloppiness. December 8, 1991, in Belarus. A place called in the forest hunting villa where the sun doesn't fall. Yeltsin of Russia, Kravchuk in Ukraine, Kozhikhovich of Belarus. The leaders of the three republics, after drinking a few bottles of vodka, drafted and signed a document. There is a cold sentence in the document: the Soviet Union as the subject and transmitter of international law. Political reality will cease to exist. 3 men in a secluded room. In this way, a superpower that has been in power for more than 70 years disbanded. And what's even more ironic, after signing the agreement, Yeltsin didn't even notify first Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev. He picked up the phone. First, I called President Bush. Reported this situation. This is when power collapses. The real face under the water. December 25, 1991, Christmas Eve in the Western world. 1932. Snow is falling on Moscow's Red Square in the cold wind that fluttered for 69 years. Once plugged into the dome of the Empire State Building in Berlin, printed with a sickle hammer's red flag with no backing track, without a ceremony, was silently lowered. In its place was the Russian tricolor flag. That moment Countless Soviet veterans in front of the TV full of tears, Moscow citizens passing by on the square, most of them just glanced at it coldly, then tightly wrapped in the tattered coat and continued on the way because they care more about where is tomorrow's bread. Speaking of which, all you see is when the building collapses dust. Historical icebergs are often 90% hidden beneath the water's surface. Exclusive member channel on my homepage will bring the World Reorganization Series Hardcore 3-level deep extended version orgy on the corpse of the Soviet death power on the eve of the collapse of the Soviet Union. Thousands of tons of gold in the treasury and tens of billions of dollars in foreign exchange. Why did it disappear overnight? The ultimate declassification of the CIA, Cold War's most ruthless wrangler. This is code that's been implanted with a virus. How did it cause the Big Bang of the century? Directly cut off the Soviet Union's continued economic anime. Next episode take you into the most desperate doomsday black market of the 1990s. Look at the leaders who have lost their bottom line. How to put a nuclear submarine concentrated oil like cabbage. Crazy sale to international drug dealers. This is not a dry textbook but a 10-year-long, the bloodiest and the most authentic national wealth grab game of power. True insider if you don't want to just watch the fun but to understand the underlying conspiracy of the great power game. Now go to the homepage to unlock the exclusive membership. Act 7: The corpse of the empire and the orgy of the oligarchs. The Soviet Union is dead, but if you think death is liberation, that's a little naive for ordinary people. The gates of hell have just opened. Russia, after independence, they immediately took the advice of Western economists. They developed a one-step shock therapy. Fully liberalize prices, push for privatization, and instead of prosperity, it was catastrophe. Inflation has reached a terrifying 2,500 rubles devalued 1,000 times. Ordinary people have worked hard to save bank deposits for a lifetime, turned into waste paper overnight, and what a tragedy that was. Moscow streets, you can see World War II veterans everywhere with various medals. They're not marching. They are in the cold wind. The way war medal that was exchanged with blood, selling to foreign tourists in exchange for a piece of moldy bread or a few dollars for medicine. The average life expectancy of Russian men in just a few years, it plummeted from 65 to 57. The GDP of the country as a whole has shrunk by more than half. That's a terrible thing in peacetime. Creepy data. While ordinary people are struggling to survive, former officials, factory managers and black market traders have been transformed. An oligarchy that controls the economic lifeblood of the country. They carved up the Soviet Union at the price of cabbage. Oil accumulated over 70 years. Huge state-owned assets such as steel and telecommunications. They're in bulletproof Mercedes. Drinking thousands of dollars a bottle of wine, stepping on the corpse of the empire, holding a carnival of capital. This is the cruelty of history. Don't be black and white about who's right and who's wrong. You just have to remember one iron law: when a massive system crashes, it is always the ordinary people at the bottom who pay the bill. Sanitation's wake-up call. Looking back at the death of the Soviet Union in 1991, it's like a huge chronic disease. He didn't die from external gunfire. He died of internal organ failure. Died of a privileged class divorced from the masses. Died of a rigid bureaucracy. Died in a long-term cover-up of history and reality. Died in a power struggle surrounded by selfish desires. A system that can send humans into space but not enough meat and butter put on the people's table. A superpower with tens of thousands of nuclear bombs, but it can't defend against a battle from within. Peaceful evolution. This is the 20th century. The most profound lesson for all humanity. Water can carry a boat, can capsize the boat. Any country that abandons its people, in the end, it will be abandoned by the people. In history, the fall of the Soviet Union changed the map of the world, including Europe. The powder keg on Balkan Island completely exploded. A powerful strongman has departed. 6 republics and 5 ethnic groups, 4 languages, the 3 religions. How was it that in a bloody civil war torn each other to shreds? Subordinate trailer. World Reorganization Game 15. Yugoslavia death. Balkan scarlet meat grinder. Do you think the Soviet Union collapsed? What is the biggest reason? Welcome to leave your comments in the comment area. See you next time.